Welcome, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Tablet of Ahmad. Dear friends, in this section, we'll be covering the story behind the Tablet of Ahmad. Dear friends, there are two tablets, each bearing the name of Ahmad, one in Persian and the other in Arabic. The latter is the one used throughout the Baha'i world, which the beloved guardian characterized as being imbued with a special potency. As to the Ahmad in whose honor the well-known tablet is revealed, he was born in Yazd around the year 1805 to a very noble and rich family. His father and uncles were the chieftains of the town, but Ahmad, even at the age of 14, showed a great inclination toward mysticism and endeavored to find new paths to truth. When he was 15, he had already started his investigations, during which he heard from some of the people that there are saints or holy men who know special prayers, which if read and repeated so many times, and in accordance with certain rituals, would definitely enable the reader to behold the countenance of the promised Qayyim, the Messiah. This flared up the fire of his ever-growing longings. He began to practice an ascetic life, with long prayers, successive days of fasting, and secluding himself from people and from the world. His parents and relatives never approved of such practices, nor did they permit him to continue this seclusion, which was contrary to their ways of life and ambition. Such opposition could not be tolerated by a man like Ahmad, who was wholeheartedly searching and striving to reach his heart's desire, reunion with his eternal beloved. Therefore, one day early in the morning, he made a small bundle of his clothes and belongings, and under the pretext of going to a public bath, departed from his father's home and set out on his way to search for God's manifestation. In a beggar's outfit, he roamed from village to village, and wherever he found a pur, which is a spiritual leader, with great devotion and rectitude of conduct, he sat at his feet in the hope of finding a path to the mysterious worlds of truth. He invariably begged such people for the special prayer, the reading of which would draw him near the court of his beloved. Whenever someone would suggest to him any practice, he was so ardent in his search that he would invariably carry out the instructions with absolute sincerity, no matter how time consuming or arduous those practices were. But all of those was of no avail. Losing hope and faith in such pursuits, he made his way to India, a land so well known for its mystic teachers and hermits with special powers and spiritual gifts. He reached Bombay and took up residence there, still looking for someone to give him a glimpse of the glorious court of the Promised One. He heard that if one would perform a specific ablution, put on spotlessly clean white garments, prostrate oneself, and repeat the following verse of the Quran: "There is no God but God," 12,000 times, he would definitely attain his aim and heart's desire. Not once, but several times Ahmad prostrated himself for hours to repeat the above mentioned verse 12,000 times, but still found himself in darkness. In his dismay, he returned to Persia, but did not go to his hometown of Yazd. He settled in this city of Kashan and started his own craft of cloth making, in which he was an expert. In no time he became a successful businessman, but still in his inmost heart he was restlessly searching. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Ask, and it shall be given to you. No true seeker ever returned from his door of mercy deprived or unanswered. It was in Kashan that the rumors about one claiming to be the promised Qayyam were heard by him. Ceaseless in his efforts and sincere in his search, Ahmad asked many people in many different ways. No one ever gave him a clue. Then one day an unknown traveler arrived in the town and stayed in the same inn where Ahmad had established his successful business. A certain inner urge drew Ahmad close to this unknown man. In their conversation, the traveler was asked about the already spreading rumor. "Why do you ask this question?" he inquired. "I want to know if it is true," was Ahmad's rejoinder. "If it is, I shall follow it with all my might." The traveler, with a smile of triumph on his face, instructed him to go to Khorasan and find a certain famous learned man called Mullah Abdul Khalik, who would tell him the whole truth. The very next day, Ahmad was on his way to the province of Khorasan. The owners of the neighboring shops were very much surprised when they did not find Ahmad at his work as usual. What passed between him and the unknown traveler? They asked one another, and no one knew the right answer. Ahmad crossed deserts and mountains on foot, and his heart overflowed with joy and longing. Every step he took, he found himself nearer and nearer to the time when all his efforts would yield the desired fruits, his reunion with his beloved, in the search for whose presence he spared no effort and found no sacrifice too great. He reached Mashhad, Khorasan, exhausted and so ill that he had to stay in bed. After 2 months' struggle to overcome his weakness, he mustered the last ounces of his strength and courage and went directly to the door of the desired house. Here are his own words as related to his friends and companions of these days. "When I reached the house, I knocked at the door, and the servant of the house came forth. Holding the door ajar, he asked me, 'What do you want?' 'I must see your master,' I answered. The man went back into the house, and then the mullah himself came out. He admitted to me his house, and when we stood face to face, I explained to him all that had happened to me. When I finished, he at once grasped my arm and told me, 'Do not say such things here,' and he pushed me out of his house. There was no end to my sorrows. Heartbroken and utterly astounded, I said to myself, 'Are all my affairs in vain? To whom shall I turn? Whom shall I approach? But I will never leave this man. I will persist till such time as he will open his heart to me and will guide me to the right path of God.' It is incumbent upon the one who searches to drain the bitter carp of hardship. The next morning I was at the door of the same house. I knocked harder and harder than the previous day. This time the mullah himself came to the door, and the moment he opened it, I said, "I will not go away. I will not leave you until you tell me the whole truth." This time he found me earnest and true. He became sure that I had not been at his door to spy or cause difficulties for him and his friends. Ahmad was then instructed to attend the evening prayers at a certain mosque where the same mullah led the congregational prayer, followed by a long sermon. He was told to follow the mullah after the sermon was over. The next night, Ahmad tried his utmost to find the mullah after the prayer and sermon, but crowds of people surrounded him, and Ahmad did not have the slightest chance even to approach him. The next day, when the two met again, Ahmad was instructed to go to another mosque at night, and a third person would be there to show him the way. Accordingly, Ahmad was at the mosque at sunset, and as promised after the evening prayers, a certain person came to him and beckoned him to follow. Without hesitation or fear, Ahmad followed. Now the three men started to walk like shadows in the darkness of the night, through narrow and obscure lanes. Ahmad, a complete stranger, never wavered nor faltered nor fled. He took every step with great determination and was ready for any outcome. At last they reached a certain house. They knocked at the door very gently, and it was opened immediately. The newcomers went in very quickly. They passed through a covered passageway, reached a small courtyard, climbed a few steps, and were at the door of an upper chamber where a dignified figure was seated. The mullah approached that revered personage with great humility and absolute reverence, and courteously whispered, "This is the man I told you about," and indicated Ahmad, who had been standing at the threshold with utter respect and high expectation. "Welcome. Please come in and be seated," said the man. Ahmad then entered the room and sat down on the floor. The host was no less a person than Mullah Sadiq, meaning truthful, one of the early believers during the Bab's ministry, and very distinguished for his erudition, audacity, and steadfastness. During Baha'u'llah's ministry, the same Mullah Sadiq displayed such great ardor and zeal that he was entitled as Asdaq, the most truthful, by Baha'u'lláh. Ahmad, who for 25 years had been wandering in the valley of search, and had nowhere found even a drop to quench his thirst, now found a path to the main spring. With parched lips and an insatiable longing, he drank in the sweet-scented stream of the verses of God through his new manifestation. 3 sessions were sufficient, and he embraced the faith with all his heart and soul. So elated, exalted, and over enthusiastic, he looked that Asdak exhorted him to return to his family in Kashan and insisted that he should not mention the faith to the people, not even to his own wife. Those days were days of extreme danger to the nascent cause of God. The few followers recruited from the poor people of the world were forever the targets of many atrocities. Even the air was imbued with suspicion, spying, and slander. Therefore, the friends had to be very, very careful, lest the slightest unwise deed or even a foolish word should ignite a never ending conflagration that would consume the believers in its flame. Yazd, knowing how Ahmad had suffered, felt that he had no money to go back home. Therefore, he gave him some small gifts for his family and the sum of 3 tumans, and again advised him to be very wise. Commenting upon his return to Kashan, Ahmad has said, "When I reached Kashan, everyone asked what had happened, that I had left everything so abruptly. I told them my longing for pilgrimage was too great to resist, and I was right. What else could take me away from my work, my house, and my family except that innermost yearning? The instant I heard these words from the traveler, there was no more patience left in me." In Kashan he resumed his work, but longed and longed to teach the faith. He heard rumors that a certain man by the name of Haji Mirza Jani had changed his faith and become the follower of a new and obscure religion. Ahmad searched for him, and when the two found each other, there was no end to their joy and excitement. They became fast friends, constant companions, and the first and only Babis of that town. One day, Haji Mirza Jani went to Ahmad and with great enthusiasm and uncontrollable excitement asked him, "Would you like to visit the countenance of your Lord?" Ahmad's heart leapt up with much joy and ecstasy. He immediately arose from his seat and asked how and when. Haji explained to him how he had arranged with the guards to have the Bab in his house as a guest for 2 or 3 nights. Therefore, at the appointed hour, Ahmad went to Haji's house. When he entered, his eyes fell on a face, the beauty of which surpassed heaven and earth. A young Sayyid was sitting with such meekness, grandeur, and majesty that one could not help but behold the light of God in his countenance. Some of the divines and dignitaries of the town were seated on the floor around, and the servants stood at the door. One of the mullahs faced the Bab and said, "We have heard that a certain young man in Shiraz has claimed to be the Bab. Is that true?" "Yes," answered the Bab. "And does he reveal verses too?" said the same man. The Bab responded, "And we reveal verses too." Ahmad has further said, this clear and courageous answer was sufficient for anyone who had ears to hear and eyes to see to find the whole truth immediately. His beautiful face and his powerful words and presence sufficed all things. But when they served tea and a cup was offered to the Bab, he immediately took it, called the servant of the same mullah, and very graciously gave it to him. The day after, the same humble servant came to me, and with great sorrow deplored the stupidity of his master. A little explanation as to the station of the Bab brought him to our fold, and our number grew to be 3. This small nucleus started to grow, and the number of the adherents increased. This angered the divines, who used all their cunning to stop the flow of the already powerful stream of life. They instigated the cruel, ignorant mob to plunder, confiscate, and kill all those who bore the name of the Bab. Every day they would go to a house so enraged they would break its doors and windows, destroy the building, and plunder and loot the contents. In the evening, one would find the bodies of people dead in the streets and lanes, and even scattered over neighboring mountains and plains. This continued, and Ahmad's house was no exception. Ahmad then had to hide in a tower for 40 days, and the friends used to take him food and provisions. Finding life unbearable in Kashan, and hearing that Baghdad had become a point of attraction, he decided to go there. And God called to the abode of peace, Baghdad, and he guideth whom he will into the right way. In the darkness of the night, Ahmad emerged from his hiding place and scaled the walls of the city to make his way to Baghdad. He traveled on foot, full of love, enthusiasm, and eagerness to behold the countenance of the one whom God would make manifest. As he was walking, he came across another man traveling in the same direction. Afraid of being molested further, Ahmad tried to ignore the stranger, uttering not a word, but the man persisted in walking by his side, taking great care never even to allude to the faith or the purpose of his journey. Ahmad and his fellow traveler reached their destination. On arrival in Baghdad, they separated, and Ahmad immediately set out searching for the house of Bahá'u'lláh. When he found the house and entered therein, he found to his utter astonishment that his companion was there too. He then understood that his friend was also a Babi and had been on his way to attain the presence of the Blessed Beauty. It was a breathtaking experience for a man like Ahmad, who all through his life had been searching for this immense spiritual fountainhead. When for the first time he glanced at the youthful countenance of Baha'u'lláh, a face full of charm, freshness of color, and penetrating powers, he was so overwhelmed he came to his senses only through the mirthful remark of the ancient beauty. He becomes a Babi and then hides in the tower? Baha'u'lláh allowed him to remain in Baghdad and have his residence close to the house. Ahmad immediately installed his small cloth making machine and was the happiest man in the world. What else does one expect? To live at the time of the supreme manifestation of God, adore Him, be loved by Him, and be so close to Him in heart and soul and even in residence. When once asked about the events of the years he spent in such close proximity to Baha'u'lláh, with tears in his eyes, Ahmad said, "How innumerable, how great, and how immensely mighty were the events of those years. Our nights were filled with memorable episodes. Joyful and at times sorrowful were our experiences, yet beyond the power of anyone to describe. For example, one day, as the Blessed Beauty was walking, a certain government officer approached him and reported that one of his followers had been killed and his body thrown on the riverbank. The tongue of power and might replied, "No one has killed him. Through 70,000 veils of light, we showed him the glory of God to an extent smaller than a needle's eye. Therefore, he could not more bear the burden of his life and has offered himself as a sacrifice." When the Caliph's decree was conveyed to Baha'u'lláh, and he had to leave Baghdad for Istanbul, he left the town on the 32nd day after Nowruz for the Rizwan garden. On that same day, the river overflowed, and only on the 9th was it possible for his family to join him in the garden. The river then overflowed a second time, and on the 12th day it subsided, and all went to him. Ahmad begged Baha'u'lláh to be amongst his companions in exile, but Baha'u'lláh did not accede to this request. He chose a few people and instructed the others to stay to teach and protect the cause, emphasizing that this would be better for the faith of God. At the time of his departure, those who were left behind stood in a row, and all were so overcome with sorrow that they burst into tears. Baha'u'lláh again approached them and consoled them, saying, "It is better for the cause. It is better for the cause. Some of these people who accompany me are liable to do mischief. Therefore I am taking them with myself." One of the friends could scarcely control his anguish and sorrow. He addressed the crowd reciting this poem of Sa'adi: "Let us all rise to weep like unto the clouds of the spring season, on the day when lovers are separated from their beloved. One can even hear the lamentations of the stones." Baha'u'lláh then said, "Verily this was said for this day." Then he mounted his horse, and one of the friends placed a sack of coins in front of the saddle, and Baha'u'lláh started to distribute the coins to the bewailing poor who were standing by. When they ran to him and pushed one another, he plunged his hand in the sack and poured all the coins, saying, "Gather them yourselves." Ahmad saw his beloved disappear from his sight, headed for an unknown destination. Little did he know that he was like unto the sun rising toward the zenith of might and power. Sad at heart and utterly distressed in soul, he returned to Baghdad, which to him seemed devoid of any attraction. He tried to make himself happy by gathering the friends and encouraging them to disperse and teach the faith which had just been declared. Though actively serving the cause, he was not happy. All that could keep him happy was nearness to his beloved. After a few years, Ahmad again left his home and work and set out on foot toward Adrianople, the city of his love and desire. When he reached Istanbul, he received a tablet from Baha'u'lláh, now well known as the Tablet of Ahmad. He describes the receipt of this tablet as follows: "I received the tablet of the Nightingale of Paradise, and reading it again and again, I found that my beloved desired me to go and teach his cause. Therefore, I preferred obedience to visiting him. Ahmad was specially commissioned to travel through Persia, find the old Babi families, and convey to them the new message of the Lord. Hence, such glorious reference to the Bab in this tablet. The task was arduous beyond description, and therefore such exhortations as, "Be thou as a flame of fire to my enemies, and a river of life eternal to my loved ones, and be not of those who doubt." The path to be pursued by him would be full of blood, thorns, and hardships to be borne, but followed by such soul-stirring promises of victory as, "And if thou art overtaken by affliction in my path, or degradation for my sake, be not thou troubled thereby." With this divine amulet in his possession, a small piece of paper which had been invested by Baha'u'lláh with a special potency and significance, and clad in the simple garments of a mendicant, Ahmad made his way back to Persia. He entered the country from the district where the Bab had been imprisoned, and martyred, and crossed this region like unto the breeze of life. Many of the Babis were thus enabled to see the sun then shining from Adrianople, and even many of the Muslims embraced the faith wholeheartedly. Ahmad became the embodiment of his own tablet. Such persistence, undaunted spirit, tenacity, and steadfastness as is are hardly to be found in any annals of the cause. When he found the seeker, although he suffered affliction and degradation, he would return again and again to finish that which had been left half discussed. For example, when he was traveling throughout the province of Khorasan, he went to the house of a well-known Babi family, the head of which was no less a person than Furughi, one of the survivors of the Tabarsi upheaval. Ahmad went in and gradually opened the subject, and in frank, vigorous, and emphatic terms explained that the one to be manifested by God was none other than Baha'u'lláh, whose light was then shining from the horizon of the remote prison, Adrianople. Furughi, who had so audaciously fought in Tabarsi, started a fight here too. The discussion became more intense as the hours went by. Furughi became quite angry, attacked Ahmad, breaking one of his teeth, and threw him out of the house. Ahmad left broken-hearted, but undaunted he later returned, knocked at the door, and told him that he would not go until such time as the subject was fully discussed and some definite conclusions reached. We must bear in mind that the Babis were in such danger that even a piece of paper bearing the verses of the Bab found in any house was enough for the house to be demolished and the inhabitants to be sent to prison or even to the field of martyrdom. Therefore, many of the friends hid their books and writings in the walls of their houses. When Ahmad went to Furughi's house for the second time to resume the discussion, he said emphatically that the greatest name, Baha, had often been mentioned by the Bab in his writings. Furughi challenged the truth of this statement. To prove to Ahmad that he was wrong, he tore a part of the wall down and brought out a bundle containing the writings of the Bab, and promised not to say a word against the explicit texts. Ahmad says, the very first one we opened referred to the name of Baha. As promised, Furughi and all the members of his family accepted the faith of Baha'u'lláh and became zealous defenders and outstanding in its propagation and protection. After crossing all the lands of Khorasan, Ahmad decided to go once more to Baghdad and convey the message of love and greetings on behalf of Baha'u'lláh to all the friends in that important city. But unfortunately, while on the way, he again fell sick and could not reach Baghdad. In addition to Tehran, some of the divines of Kashan recognized him and lodged complaints against him at the court of the king, who was ever ready to inflict hardship on the adherents of the new faith. He was consequently arrested and committed to the hands of a certain young officer who was ordered to investigate the case, and if he was sure that his victim had gone astray, to put to him to death immediately. The young officer did not wish to molest Ahmad, and therefore insisted that he should recant his faith. Ahmad says, "At that moment I was at the height of my faith and enthusiasm, and never for one moment even thought of recanting. Ever ready to lay down his life in the path of the cause, he served with such self-sacrifice that he insisted he was not a Babi but a Baha'i, a follower of the Supreme Manifestation. He was detained, and while in prison heard of the sudden and severe illness of the officer's wife. In great fright and extreme distress, the officer came to Ahmad and said, 'Should my wife recover, I will release you.' And after 3 days, the young man, heedless of the dire consequences to himself, took Ahmad to the gate of Tehran and set him free. Released like a bird, he first went to the villages where some sifters of wheat were Babis. They received him with the utmost love and courtesy. They offered him hospitality, and he guided them to the right path of God, and in great rejoicing Ahmad left them and made his way to the province of Fars, the capital of which was Shiraz. He lived in this province for about a quarter of a century, and became the constant companion of the wrong and afflicted ones. He consoled them during times of persecution and gave them hope and a vision of the ever widening horizons of victories and triumphs. It was through the old people of this district of Persia that this humble servant, the writer, came to hear the distant echoes of a glorious dervish living among the villagers that he had been to them as an angel of a protection, guidance, and mercy. Such rumors set me to search about him, and I found that this admirable individual was our precious Ahmad, a name now mentioned throughout the world with so much love and devotion. Ahmad received many of the traveling teachers who passed through this part of Persia, and feasted with them in his humble abode, mentioning God, his faith, and recounting the experience of the many teachers who had been in those days quickening many souls. One of the most touching incidents, as related by himself, was the following. One of the most touching incidents occurred when one day a man barely clad and almost barefooted came to the door of my house. He was utterly exhausted and worn out. His clothes were stiff and brownish, with a mixture of dust and perspiration. He happened to be Haji Mirza Haidar Ali. I immediately helped him to take off his clothes. I washed them and spread them in the sun to dry while he rested, waiting for the friends to come for a meeting. The years passed by full of eventful days, but when the waves of persecution spread all over Persia, the friends, in their love and admiration for Ahmad, endeavored to protect him against fatal attacks. And after long consultation, they suggested to him that he immediately leave that forlorn and forsaken corner of the country for a more populated center. Wherever Ahmad went, the friends suggested the same thing to him. He was so well known through the length and breadth of the country that his mere presence would cause agitation among the bigoted Muslims, whose first arrows would be aimed at Ahmad himself. After changing many places of residence, many times, he settled in Tehran. He never wavered, nor was he ever anything but that flame of fire and river of life eternal. After having lived 1 century and always enjoying good health, he passed on to the presence of his beloved in 1905 in Tehran. As to the family of Ahmad, he had 2 children, a son called Mirza Muhammad and a daughter, Khanum Guhar. When Ahmad's house was confiscated, Mirza Muhammad, his wife and children, left the city of Kashan for Tehran. He, his wife, and small daughter died on their way to Tehran. The traces of their graves, if any, are lost forever. There remained only their son, Jamal, aged 5. The mule drivers who used to take food from provinces to Tehran, not knowing that Jamal was a son of Babis, took pity on the forsaken and homeless child, and placing him on one of the loads brought him to Tehran. In that great capital the child was left all alone, and no one even told him of his glorious ancestry, or of the faith in whose path the family had borne so many afflictions and untold hardships. He was left in this state until his aunt Khanum Guhar also went to Tehran. When Ahmad reached the capital, he came to know of his grandson, whom he loved very much. He took him under the wings of his own love and protection, and Jamal grew to be an excellent Baha'i. His most outstanding characteristics were his iron determination and his indefatigable energy. Nothing could ever deflect this man from the straight path of God, though to him it had always been narrow and strewn with thorns, blood, and multifarious plights and calamities. Toward the end of his life, Ahmad entrusted the original Tablet of Ahmad to Jamal, who in turn, out of the purity of his heart and his devotion to the faith of God, offered it as a gift to the hand of the cause, trustee of Hukuk, the son of the brother of 2 illustrious martyrs, Janabe Waliullah Varqa. When Janabe Varqa, according to the instructions of the beloved guardian, attended the opening ceremony of the house of worship in Wilmette during the Intercontinental Conference of the year 9 1953, he brought this most precious tablet as his offering to the archives of the Baha'is of the United States. Now the beloved friends in that great country are the trustees of this great gift of God to humanity. Thank you, dear friends.